Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Microsoft 365 Pulse. We have us three beautiful individuals here today. Jenn is working, so you're stuck with us. But we figured we go ahead and talk about all the new updates in the Microsoft 365 world. It's going to be a good show today, not excessively long, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So as always, we're going to kind of go through the various options. Tons of new stuff in Teams this week, which is going to be cool to talk about. But yeah, we'll kind of get it started with in development. Tamara, I think Tom got to go first last week. So you want to go ahead and start us off?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, Teams got an awful lot of love this week. So, Teams in development is Teams webinar capabilities will be generally available. And what that means is that you can schedule and deliver 1,000-person webinar with the same Teams app that you use for meetings. So the webinar capabilities will support a registration page creation, email confirmations for registrants, and host management for attendee video and audio, attendee reporting, plus interactive features like polls, chats, and reactions. And this is supposed to launch this month, but it is still in development. So I'm not quite sure how quickly we're going to get there.
Tom, you want to go ahead and grab something next?
Sure. There's a really interesting here about one about Word, but I did say I wouldn't take that one because Adam wants to take that one. So I will go and steer way away from that one. SharePoint News Boost. So this is a method they don't have a lot of details about how they're going to do this, but it allows you to prioritize important news and announcements to appear at the top of news feeds across 365. So what I'm assuming this means is if you have a news view or an announcements view or something like that, you can boost the visibility by saying, I want it boosted for a set period of time, till an employee has seen your content, or until a viewer has actually seen the item in their feed a set number of times. So I suppose this is really good for your, company news that is important, has a certain time frame, but maybe this particular group of things doesn't get a lot of activity. Well, you can boost it up to the top, and then it's going to go back to its normal position once they hit whatever criteria is out there. So I think this should be interesting. It says in development. It also says April. I don't believe we would see it by the end of this month, but keep an eye open for it.
I thought this seen X number of times was kind of cool. That you could be like,
Yeah.
I want to put it in there, 3 or 4 times so people see it. Because, if it's just once, you have no guarantee that the person doesn't just immediately click buy it. I thought that was kind of a cool feature.
Yeah, it's almost like with the way that they serve up ads. It's like, how many times are we going to be serving this up to the person? So
That's an awful lot of tracking, though.
Yeah, no, it
True.
definitely is. So Tom actually mentioned one that I'm going to take. I've told a story about why I like these, so I'll briefly hit on it again. So they have dark mode coming to Word. So there'll be a new dark mode if you're someone who likes the dark version of stuff that's supposed to be, nicer on your eyes and stuff like that. That's coming out again, similar to both what Tamara and Tom said. It's supposed to be coming out in April. So I guess if we'll see it'll come through. But part of the reason why I really like this, one of my favorite experiences I've ever had, was at Ignite about 2 years ago, and I decided to go to a OneNote session. And for anyone who watches the show or knows me, I'm a pretty technical dude, so that was a little bit of a different crowd. I'm used to going to the sessions that are like, we're going to talk about Azure Sentinel and dig into complex stuff. So different type of people at the OneNote session. And how they started the session was they went through and started, and then they dim the lights in the thing, and this deep techno music starts blasting, kind of electronic and everything like that. And they basically played this ad that was hyper over the top, trying to be hip, announcing that OneNote had a dark mode. And then when they got done with that, the guy who owns OneNote went up to the front and really over the top was typing into his phone and was like, I have just now sent out the message to roll out dark mode to OneNote for everyone in the world. And people are standing up and cheering and clapping. And I'm sitting there, I was kind of off to the side in the front row. It's like, what the hell is happening? It was So every time that I see dark mode announcements, I get really excited. I think about that back in the day. And funny enough, like I actually do really like dark modes. I use them, but like people lost their damn minds at that conference. I had no idea what was happening.
Oh, too funny. And this is why I let him have the dark mode one.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys want to have anything else? We still have a ton of team stuff to talk about.
Yeah, there's a great thing in Teams that is coming out. It's in development. It's not due out until June, but it has to do with breakout rooms. And what they're doing is they're extending the management of breakout rooms to specific presenters. So you'll be able to designate who can have control of breakout rooms. I think this is brilliant because a lot of times, like the admin will be the organizer for the meeting, and they are the only person who
They
can
can't be in
do
12
breakout
breakout
rooms
rooms at
right
once.
now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So allowing this to be available for different presenters, I think it is great. Also, new assignment experience in modal window for breakout rooms, which means there's enhanced user interface for participant assignment. And this includes new capabilities like sorting participants and rooms and performing multiple selections and assignments to rooms. Also in breakout rooms, there's now pre-meeting room creation and participant assignment. I'm like, this is brilliant. This is due out in May. And what it does is it introduces the capability for the organizer to perform the breakout room configuration and participant assignment before the meeting starts. Now, I would assume that means that you have to invite attendees to the meeting as opposed to doing like a channel meeting or sending out the link and just let anybody attend, because you'll have to know who the participants are in order to assign them to rooms. So, but at the very least, it lets you configure the rooms prior to the meeting starting. And this, I think, will save an awful lot of time.
And since she's been dealing with Teams, I'll go ahead and stay on that same theme here. They are rolling out a boy, I cannot speak today. Roaming bandwidth control. So this is going to allow your Teams admins to say, okay, based on the geographic location of where this person might be dialing in from, we're going to have some dynamic bandwidth policies out there. So if you're in an area that is not well known for having great bandwidth, or you're going to be on the road, maybe you're in a hotel room that's got like, you know, a 1 meg up, half a meg down, you know, type thing, what they can do is have these bandwidth controls in place for this particular person in this particular location. And then when they travel to somewhere where they do have full access again, then that gets gets eliminated and they have the full ability at that point. So it says initially 2 settings from the Teams meeting policy will be included, allow IP video and media bitrate KB. So they'll be able to say, hey, if you don't have great you know, throughput on your pipe, we're not going to let you do IP video because that's just not going to play well. Or we're going to restrict the number of bits that you can deal with because you don't have a whole lot to deal with in the first place. So that's coming up. That should be in May. And then this is something that when we told this to one of our people who does producing of live events, they're like, oh my God, this is awesome. When do we have it? And that is separate window team live events producer experience. So now instead of trying to produce the event with the split screen that you've got and the whole bit, they're going to allow you to do the producing from a full screen, a separate full screen. So this is going to give you a lot more things to deal with, or a lot more real estate to take a look at, and to not have everything crammed into this small space. The person, like I say, that we had mentioned this to, this they believe is like going to change their life. So this is a good thing, and that's supposed to be out in May. So look for that coming soon to a Teams tenant near you.
So I noticed there was two. I'm going to kind of tee this one up for either of you guys. I noticed there was several updates going through with tags in Teams,
Yes,
specifically
I wanted
coming
to
for
talk about that.
Yeah, so specifically for GCC High, for DoD, and some new
Mhm.
API experiences and some new experience of going through and doing stuff. So yeah, why don't you go ahead and tell people what tags are if they don't know what it are, then kind of elaborate on some of the new features.
Sure. What tags do is it allows you to put people into I don't want to say group because group has a different connotation when we're talking about Microsoft, but it lets you create a subset of people within Teams. And then you can call attention to those people by typing in the tags. And you can tag different pieces of content with these tags without having to do an app mention or type out every single person. Now, the only drawback is that you can't use the tags to invite people to meetings. So that was one piece that I got really excited. I'm like, I'm going to invite people with tags. Well, that didn't
No,
work.
you're not.
Crash and burn.
No, not going to do that. And then also manage tags in Teams programmatically. Microsoft Team Tags APIs are now in public preview. And this is set to come out in June. So this set of APIs can be used programmatically to assign users tags in a team, making team creation and maintenance faster and easier. Tags in Teams let users quickly reach a group of people without having to do an app mention or type out everyone individually. Users can use the tags to start a chat, or by app mentioning the tag in a channel post, it draws attention to the post. For more information on tags in Teams, see using tags in Teams and using these new APIs, the developers can now create tags in team and assign users and get a list of tags in a team, update tags, and delete tags. So the APIs are becoming available to start interacting with tags, which means you won't have to create them by hand anymore, but still your average user can create tags by hand and communicate with a select group of people.
Sure. There was a couple other just random things that I saw that I thought was interesting, but Tom, is there anything else you wanted to mention first?
Not really. If I had to say anything, it's like I would be a throwaway of, hey, in Visio, they now have 400 new shapes for Amazon Web Services architecture. Rock on.
So I actually like this just because
Yes,
like
I do. It's a good thing.
yeah, well, like to me, it's kind of like Microsoft's. When I first came into the Microsoft world, when I first started my professional IT career, was like around realistically like the SharePoint 2007, 2010 times, when Microsoft was like, we have a solution for everything and it's SharePoint. It doesn't matter that your experience is shit. Do it in SharePoint. And so like I kind of came onto that experience where a whole bunch of organizations, SharePoint almost became a dirty word for them because like they would have companies that would go through and try to deploy SharePoint, and then the experience wouldn't be great and the users wouldn't be happy. But if you try to do anything with SharePoint and some other service, it was even worse. And so the fact that they're willing to do stuff like realize that, hey, a lot of our own users are potentially using our competitor for stuff too. We're going to enable it and make it easier and build features around that. I see the same way with like connectors and some of the stuff they do there. I actually think it's cool. A couple other random throwaway ones or random ones that are just kind of like on their side. They announced that there's going to be a new data loss prevention solution overview page. So when you read it, it basically says it's going to be a place inside a compliance center that overviews everything going on in DLP and provides suggestions or options to the users. Potentially, I think this could be really good. Right now, you kind of have to dig to find data loss prevention inside the compliance page. And it's basically just brings you a page where you can create new policies, but you kind of have to know what you're doing. I see this as potentially valuable for organizations that maybe aren't security experts but still have needs to be able to do stuff like DLP. So I'm interested to see once that actually comes into production, what that looks like, what type of suggestions they offer people and things like that. Because again, just kind of nice to have stuff like that being added in. And another kind of small one that I just thought was kind of cool. So they're actually made it so that admins can go through and set organizational logos for Outlook for iOS and Android. So specifically what I'm thinking of is people that have like MDM solutions and they have work accounts. And if you've ever done that, if you go in there and your work account's set up and then you have like your own account, like, you know, probably Tamara, me, and Tom all probably have. I have my own lab environment that I do stuff in Office 365 with. That's my own domain that I can, you know, theoretically do stuff as like, this is Adam, the brand inside of Office 365, which is separate from, Adam who works at Planet Technologies. And right now, there's no real easy way to differentiate those inside of my Outlook for iOS client. Specifically, sometimes I will actually send off emails to clients from my lab environment, which I don't really want to be doing. And like, don't get me wrong, it looks professional. It's my name at my domain and stuff like that. But like, obviously, I want my work stuff to stay on work stuff.
Right.
So just going through and having the logos being associated with it, it's actually going to be like when you look at your accounts, you can have like your company logo sitting next to the one that's actually your work account and stuff. So I see it as a kind of nice, a kind of cool quality of life thing.
That's cool.
One last one I'd like to throw out is Outlook updates to attachments in received mail. So Microsoft is consolidating the options to manage a received file under a single drop-down menu, similar to Outlook for Windows and Mac. For customers with OneDrive enabled, they're adding the ability to directly edit Word, Excel, and PowerPoint attachments in the corresponding desktop or web app. So this has got me a little excited. I've often tried editing attachments to no avail and then losing the changes that you've made. So that makes me sad. That's coming out in April.
Cool. Well, we can move on to the next stage, which is rolling out. Obviously, as we talk often with the progression, Microsoft will announce stuff and put it on the roadmap. It will be in development. From there, once they actually start going through and rolling it out to the first tenants that will see it, it goes to rolling out, and we'll stay there until it gets to the point that all the various tenants that are under the scope of the cloud that they're rolling it out to get rolled out, then it'll finally be deployed. But so moving on into rolling out, Tom, you want to go ahead and get us started since Tamara got to start off the show?
Sure. And with most of these, we've discussed them at certain points in time when they were in development, so there's not a lot of new stuff here. The one I'm going to bring up, I'm going to do so just because a week and a half ago, I would have looked at this and gone, huh? But I'm studying for the Microsoft Teams admin certification, and now I'm like, oh, I understand what this is now. So in Microsoft Teams, they're now going to have voice-enabled channels. And what that means is you're going to be able to put a call queue in Microsoft Teams, assuming that you're using the phone systems, into a channel for an existing channel in Teams. So what that means is that you could have a channel which is your IT help desk or your HR hotline. And when you attach the call queue to that, that means that as calls come in, the people who are part of that channel can be in rotation or they can all get pinged at the same time. But you also have a chat going on in this channel that's part of the call queue. And I think that's a really interesting concept where all of a sudden it's not just like, well, we've got a call queue and you've got 10 people taking calls and each call is separate and they don't know what the other person's doing. Well, now you can have a chat going on in the background, which means you can have a little bit of collaboration as you're trying to answer questions for the person you have on your call because you're also connected to the other 9 people who are taking calls. I think that's a really cool thing, and I'm not sure that we would ever use it in our environment, but I thought it was really special.
Tamara, anything you're interested in?
Teams, more teams. Just a ton of love for Teams this week. So Microsoft Teams Windows native notification in Teams. Users can now choose to deliver the Microsoft Teams notifications via Windows 10 native notifications. That's rolling out in April. And also improved updates for meetings on Android. So Microsoft is improving the team experience on Android devices with a new presentation mode and the ability to see more participants and the ability to see shared content and spotlighted. How about spotlighted participants concurrently? Spotlighted. I am like really out to get you. I'm going to highlight you during this meeting. So yeah, you can spitefully highlight somebody in Teams meetings now and soon on Android. That should have rolled out last month. So you should be seeing it coming out in your environment.
Yeah, so they actually came out with quite a few Azure Active Directory updates coming in rolling out this
Tons.
time. I'm not going to talk about all of them because most of them get kind of nerdy, and no one needs to hear me drone on about nerdy things for like 20 minutes. But to just highlight one or two that I thought was cool, temporary access pass. The idea is, say, I used to have this happen back when I was at Rackspace. Have multi-factor authentication. It's going in on your phone, and you leave your phone at home one day. Or you have multi-factor authentication of a FIDO2 key. It would be something like a USB stick that you have to plug in, and you don't have that one day. But you're at your office, you're at work, you need a temporary way around. Well, they can actually create temporary access passes, which is a passcode that you could use in lieu of potentially your stronger authentication methods. They'll have a very small window that you can use it to get in. So, hey, you need to log in, you need to get into your thing. I know that you're the real user, like you're sitting in front of me in work. I can prove from your side as an admin I know who you are. I can basically create one of these, what they're calling taps or temporary access pass. They'll give you access into the system, won't erase your existing authentication methods, because assuming you can pick them up again in the future, or potentially with FIDO2, you may even be passwordless entry where you're entering in a USB stick, but give you that temporary workaround to allow you to go in and get access to it. So I think that's kind of cool. I can definitely tell you, when I used to have to carry around my RSA token, and I'd have that, there'd be times that I'd leave my lanyard at home, or I couldn't find it for a little bit or something. So it's a real thing to potentially have to have the ability to get around this temporarily, but maybe not want to fully reset it. And so kind of a cool thing they're going through and adding. Besides that, you see some other protections and stuff around conditional access and around business to consumer stuff that they're doing. I'm sure we'll probably talk about it when they actually go to launched as well too. Some of them we've talked about before. But if you're interested in some of the advances coming out in Azure AD, you can definitely check out the roadmap. There's a lot that just moved into rolling out this week.
There's only one other item I saw there, which is a kind of a quality of life thing, but I think it's a really good idea that they've done this, and that is in Microsoft Forms. It used to be up in the upper right corner when you'd want to share with a person. There was one button, and that button gave you the option to share either the form itself for people to respond to, or a share option to allow people to edit and work with the form in design mode. Those are two very different things and we're very easily confused. They've actually now split the sending and sharing entry points. So you have a button that says basically, you can now have access to help me develop this thing, or we're going to send you the link so you can actually fill out the form. I think that's a great separation between the two. Should have probably been done in the initial rollout, but I'm glad to see it's out there now.
Okay, one last thing for me. Microsoft Teams forms polls in Teams meeting improvements. So a set of top asks will be addressed with this general release that comes out in April. So polls in Teams meetings now will support guests and an optimized mobile experience. So you'll be able to get more people to answer your polls. It'll make the meetings more interactive. I think it's a good win.
Sure. So a couple just to throw out there again of kind of one-offs. I'm not going to spend too much time on this one, but if you are interested in STS, strict transport security, it's a mechanism or a protocol that bases how you should handle email communication. It basically says like, oh, you can only communicate through TLS with this person. If not, don't transmit to them, stuff like that. To do that level of customization, you used to have your own Exchange server, your own SMTP server. You couldn't go down that strictly in Exchange Online. They're actually pushing out support for that into the cloud now. So for some organizations, this may mean they can get rid of their hybrid Exchange server, which is kind of cool. Another thing that I thought was cool, and I kind of pair these two together in my head. So Microsoft Defender for 365, they're getting a ton of improvements to alerts and hunting. I kind of see this as a progression of Microsoft continuing to advance their Defender solutions, which give them the idea of protection over both Office 365, but also the desktop on people's computer and stuff. If you remember, around the beginning of the year, they rebranded like 8 different things Defender that all kind of go together and help each other out. Well, Defender for Office 365 does stuff like real-time detections of going through and looking at stuff actually on the Office 365 tenant. And then one more piece that, again, I kind of tie together in my head. if you're using Teams and you're also managing the computer for people in Windows 10, you can now actually push out Teams notifications into the built-in Windows notifications. So when you get the Windows 10 notifications in your bottom corner, right now, you probably get separate notifications for what's going on into Teams. Admins will have the ability to basically combine those together, so you just have one set of notifications going in. I see this ultimately as continued steps down the march of, one, a good thing, because if you're an IT admin, it kind of gives you the more control over you are protecting someone's system and integrating someone's system. And if you want to be cynical about it, of Microsoft controlling literally everything that you're doing on top of your computer so that you can never leave. So either way, it's continuing to progress down. So we'll move to the last section, as I kind of mentioned. That's launch, where wherever the cloud that this is scoped, so it may be GCC, it may be all the clouds, it may just be commercial, has now been fully launched. We have a decent amount of stuff that moved into launch this week. So Tamara, you want to go ahead and start us off again?
Yes. Teams.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Yes. So live transcriptions with speaker attribution is launched March. So live transcripts provide another way to follow along with what has been said and who said it. And after the meeting, the transcript file is automatically saved in the chat tab for that meeting. This is available to the commercial cloud and GCC. And I know that my clients that are in the DoD are just chomping at the bit to get this. This is a question that comes up in almost every Ask Me Anything or open office hours. Also with Teams, moving up the number of individuals that can be a member of a team to 25,000. This again is in GCC and the commercial tenant, not in GCC High or DoD yet. That came out, that launched in February, so you should be seeing that in your tenants. We currently have a limit of 2,500 people per team in the DoD tenant and the GCC High tenant, and it's really wreaking havoc with like champions channels and things like that in Teams.
Cool. So I saw a couple that I will bring up, and I've discussed these before and talked about them in previous ones. One that Office 365 for Word and Outlook, they have dictation improvements. So if you're used to using voice commands or things like that to not use your keyboard, you now have new UI and settings to control a profanity filter and automatic punctuation.
I want to be the person who programs the profanity filter.
I so want to go out there and test this thing just to see what happens. So that should be out. That was launched theoretically in March, so you should see it out there now. And then Word for the Web, text predictions. This is something that we've had in Outlook. Outlook on the web, definitely. It's now started to make it to Outlook client. Well, now they're also doing text predictions for Word on the web, which means as you're typing along in Word and it thinks it knows what you're going to do next, it'll provide the words. And if you like them, you just hit tab and you're at the end, you can keep typing. I don't know if that actually grabs from the same pool of, hey, here's what I think you're going to do, that the Outlook stuff pulls from, or whether it says, okay, the stuff you type in Outlook may be completely different than the stuff you type in Word. Therefore, we're going to have two different AI processes going on for trying to anticipate what it is you're going to see. But again, I like that feature when I'm doing emails. I'm looking forward to using it more in Word if I decide to use the browser for what I do in Word. So good stuff there.
So a couple things from my side. There's a ton of Azure AD stuff again. So as of Azure Active Directory, I'm not going to go through all of them because there's usually like 10 or 15, but a couple ones that jumped out to me that I thought were kind of cool. Passwordless authentication for Azure Active Directory. So this is set up for people in a hybrid environment. So if they have a local AD as well as a cloud AD, you can basically have passwordless authentication fully launched now. FIDO2 is a way that you could do this purely in Azure AD, but it's a way to give you passwordless authentication by something like a USB stick or something like that you have. In general, passwordless authentication is considered way more secure than password-based authentication because there's not stuff that you can have leaked that hackers can get. The only way that they can go through and get in is if they can actually mimic something like a USB stick that you plug in, which is way harder to do than just getting a password that could be, keylogged or written down or something like that. So in general, as a security person, the more we can move towards true passwordless authentication, the better. Now, it's something that I think you'll only see in kind of larger organizations at first, because it does typically require something like a USB stick or something like that in order to make it work. But I think that is the direction the industry is moving in. So the more developments we can have like this that make the integration into stuff like 365 easier, the better. The other thing that I saw that I thought was kind of cool and worth mentioning as you go through and do it was the idea of doing Azure B2C, which is business to consumer, integration with some of the other areas and other features out there. The reason I thought this was kind of cool is it basically allows users to add Azure authentication into their third-party apps. So if you want to go through and do as hey, I have an app that people are going to use, I want to use Azure as the medium that users authenticate in. I see this as the first steps towards, potentially 5 years down the road, maybe even 2 years down the road, maybe even sooner than that. You know how right now you can go to various web pages and various services, and you might be able to log in with your Gmail account, you might be able to log in with your Facebook account, and that's how it stores your credentials. Well, long term, I think we're kind of going down that route with Office 365, where if they have easy to integrate APIs that allow Azure B2C, which is business to consumer, if you allow that type of integration where people can go through and do it, well, then they can rely on something like an Office 365 login or a Microsoft login that tons of people have and tons of people have secured to verify into their own apps. And the attractive thing about doing it this way is I'm less comfortable with the idea of going through and using a complex password when I'm working with random company A on the internet. Let's take something silly, right? Like even something like Discord, which has been rumored Microsoft is going to buy. I don't know that they have as good of corporate security as someone like Microsoft would, where I have my work credentials. And I know for a fact I don't have two-factor authentication turned on my Discord account and stuff like that. So if you go into a world down in the future where some of these other types of applications and integrations, they could basically say, well, we don't want to know any of your username or information. We'll just use an API and Microsoft will tell us whether it's you or not you, and we can store the login information that way. Well, I feel pretty confident about my credentials and information in Microsoft and Azure AD. I have it tied to my phone with two-factor authentication. I know the security that goes into that. So if I can leverage that where then all of the other applications getting is a thumbs up or a thumbs down, to me, that's a way more secure experience. I already like when companies do that with stuff like my Gmail account, which is not in my mind as secure as something like my Microsoft account. So if that is the direction that this can go down to, which I see this opening the door to that type of possibility, potentially I think that's a really, really cool thing and a really cool development.
Very cool.
Great.
Anything else from you guys around launched?
I'm good.
I've got two things. One, meeting recap in Microsoft Teams. So meeting recap is going to help teams stay on track and keep their work moving forward after the meeting is over. So coming this year, released in March, a recap with the meeting recording, transcript, chat, shared files, and more will be shared with participants in the meeting chat tab and viewable in the details tab for each meeting. So I thought that was interesting. They're kind of putting everything
this is
all together in a
amazing
package.
for people like me. So I know Tom's going to fit into this boat because I've heard him say it oftentimes. I'm a good talker. I can get on there and on the spot, I can pull stuff out. But whether or not I'm going to remember exactly what I said is somewhat up in the air. And on top of that, too, I genuinely have the problem sometimes right now that if I have a meeting that I don't have a project manager or an account manager in there with me, we're going to have much worse notes than one that we do. Because most of the time it's going to be me leading the conversation. It's going to be me interacting with a customer and going from there. And the tone and the pacing of the meeting is not right if every time I speak I have to stop and write down information. And to be blunt, the engineers like me are not great note takers. So even if I have another one in there with me, the quality of notes you're going to get out of there is not the greatest. So the fact that they've now launched the ability to do this, we'll see how accurate the dictation is and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And like, don't get me wrong, it's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be the same as like an AM or a person actually sitting there taking notes. But just being able to go in and see a transcript of what was discussed and potentially being able to search that content to find keywords of, oh, hey, I can remember my customer was talking about this, but I don't remember exactly what he asked. Well, I can go in and look at the transcript and see what they specifically asked. This is honestly game changing for me. For someone that is not a great organized person and note taker, this is truly like something that can add a ton of value to teams for me. So when I saw that this was launched, I was actually really excited about it and really excited to use it as a feature in my own tenant.
Nice.
I'm really anxious to be able to just search the transcripts for the words to do so I can pull out all my to-dos
There you
or
go.
everybody's to-dos out of the meeting.
Yeah, like
So I think that'll be great.
what Adam was talking about is the fact that I start out with really good intentions to take notes, but I'm not ADD, but I tend to be easily distracted in meetings. And what happens is after about 2 or 3 minutes, I start engaging in the meeting itself. It's like, oh, I was supposed to be writing stuff down for the last 20
And
minutes.
then you get to the end of the meeting and you're just like, crap.
I have nothing, absolutely nothing written down because
So
You
I'll
have
take
2
notes and
cryptic
send them out to you
lines
guys
and then
later.
nothing.
I have, here's who was in here. I don't know what any of them said though. So that's a good one.
And then a big win for GCC High and DoD is the ability to record meetings now. And they go to your OneDrive or your SharePoint, the back end, the Teams environment SharePoint, instead of going to stream. So this means that it's all stored in the DoD environment. It's all stored in the GCC High environment. It'll go to OneDrive if you just invite individuals to the meeting, and then it goes to the OneDrive of the person who started the recording. If you invite the channel, if you invite a team channel to the meeting, it will go to the team's SharePoint site. And it conveniently puts the recordings in a folder called, you guessed it, recordings.
Recordings.
No, it's recordings.
Okay,
It's even
recordings.
that simple. So it does make it easy to find. And it also shows up in the chat.
Yeah, very cool stuff.
That's all I have for launched.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and mention it for us. We have 2 canceled items listed. One of them simply a duplicate, so we're not going to worry about that. But they do actually have a canceled or removed item. It was Office 365 dictation improvements in Word for Mac, including voice commands. So a very specific thing. But they basically have removed the roadmap item for a new UI and potential controls and a profanity filter specifically related to Mac and dictation. I don't know if they're rolling it into what they're doing for all of their dictation, if there's going to be a different experience, if maybe they're doing a full rebuild of the Mac apps as well. You see that from time to time every so many often years, but just for now that was removed from the roadmap, so we wanted to note it out that it was there. If that crushed your heart because you're really waiting for the dictation in Mac, I'm sorry about that. But besides that, I think that's all we have for this week. I hope you guys had a good week. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye,
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.